I tend to kind of shoot from the hip.
If my first Kickstarter failed, I'd be like, well, obviously I shouldn't be doing this.
Kickstarter that I did wasn't successful.
The figures itself, they have like a mix of vintage and modern.
Audiences are starting to get a little bit of nostalgia fatigue.
I mean, how often do you need to buy a new Batman?
Jason likes to jump off the cliff and build his wings on the way down.
It's not what people think it is.
You've gotten all those characters and now you're looking for something new. And they try to say it, I'm like, the Kermit the Frog character, Holy shit, we did that. That's crazy,
When you started it, did you start it because you just always wanted a toy line, or did you see like a gap in the toy market that you could fill?
A little bit of both. I had a real creative itch that I needed to scratch. I can remember, I got my degree in graphic design. I've always been interested in the arts. My dad was an artist, and so was my grandmother. I just grew up drawing and doodling. I got my first real world job right out of college, and it paid well, but it just really wasn't very fulfilling. Cartoon Network had a really great lineup of just great action cartoons, believe it or not, like Green Lantern, the Thundercats 2011, Brave and the Bold, stuff like that. And it really kind of made me want to tell the hero's tale from a different perspective. And I happened to be doing a design job for a drive-through zoo. And at the end of the week, I was just cleaning up a bunch of doodles that I had of animals. And I thought it would be really fun to tell the hero's tale through an animal perspective. And then it just kind of formed from there. At first, I was thinking about doing a lemur as the main protagonist. And then I thought, well, I'm not that good at drawing lemurs, so let me do something that's a little bit more human-like and a little bit more relatable. And then it just kind of went from there.
For anyone that is new to Animal Warriors of the Kingdom, action figures, can you give us a quick rundown on what makes them a must-have?
It's a fun product. We try and separate ourselves from other lines by making sure that people know that there's playability for all ages. We got customizations for the adults, and we have sturdy figures for the kids.
Which one of these is your favorite figure? Or what are you most proud of?
I would say I'm probably most proud of, this is our main character, Pale. He's essentially our He-Man, Luke Skywalker, Lion-O. He's got a kind of a more subdued armor, and it allows for us to draw him a lot easier because he's prominently featured in almost every panel of the comic book. And it just allows for really great posing. He doesn't really have a lot of stuff that's going to kind of get in the way and allow you to get some kind of wild poses. He can do a split, no problem.
Flexible.
He can do the ever fun butt kick, So just an all around kind of fun figure for people to try out for the first time and kind of jump into the world of AWOK.
Love it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Was there like a moment where like you're like, okay, this is gonna work? Like went from like, okay, maybe, but then there's like this thing happened. You're like, okay, this actually is going to work.
My friend Brandon he made a good analogy about me. He said, Jason likes to jump off the cliff and build his wings on the way down. And so I feel very much that I tend to kind of shoot from the hip and just kind of go for it and figure it out as I go. But I did have like a very like visceral image of stuff coming to fruition. I had a lot of belief in it. It has to work out because I don't know what I'm going to do if it doesn't.
What did it take to launch the toy company?
Well, the first Kickstarter that I did wasn't successful, which was really a bummer for about 2 weeks. And then I realized, the worst case scenario has happened. I failed, but I learned a lot. And I realized that I need to learn a lot more and understand a lot more about marketing and what collectors and customers want. So it gave me a year to learn how to market on the social networks at the time and also save up the money to basically start from the drawing board. It takes a lot of patience. It obviously takes capital. And if you don't have anything to start off with, you're going to have to kind of eat beans and rice, so to speak, for a little while before you can kind of get that initial investment of your tooling and your first wave of figures done.
If my first Kickstarter failed, I'd be like, well, obviously I shouldn't be doing this. Did you always see it as like, no, there's something I can do better, or like, did you fight that like feeling of just giving up or at all? Or
So when I grew up, I had dyslexia and ADHD. So, struggling and kind of pushing through was just second nature. I did feel sorry for myself for about 2 weeks and kind of moped around. And then I looked at what I did achieve from that first attempt. We got halfway to goal and we got a bunch of really good constructive feedback, and I thought, well, that stuff's easy to implement. It's just a matter of, having the money to fix those issues. And then again, learning how to market correctly. At the time, it was almost 10 years ago. In 2017 is when I did the first Kickstarter. Back then, it wasn't as intuitive running ads. It's like you just kind of run an ad and they didn't necessarily tell you, oh, hey, you might want to run it to this age group. You might want to market to people who are interested in toys, 80s, fun, stuff like that. So I really just kind of took it as, hey, listen, you were doing something right, but you weren't doing everything right. And if you improve enough, it's not a guarantee, but the audience is there. And, if you try again, you've already experienced the worst, so you know what to expect if that's the case.
It probably is really cool to see new figures, plus kind of bring in some,
From where we've come, Jason's first step into action figures was with a significantly smaller scales, like the 3 3/4 inch line. And that was what I liked. But as things progress, you realize that going with a larger scale, there's a lot more that you can do with it. Now some people may argue that there are limitations because with our specific story, there's really cool, elaborate, bases, if you will, treetop forts and stuff like that. But to be able to make that in this scale, financially, it's a more daunting task than most fans really understand. That's why you see Hasbro doing crowdfunded stuff for, the Dragonfly and stuff like that. So
it started out with 3 3/4.
It did. I have a very distinct memory of getting out of the pool after swimming lessons. And I grew up in the 80s and my parents were all sitting around the table with their friends. I don't know if you guys remember this, but they had the tables that were actually like big wire spools. I've got like a distinct memory of picking up a stormtrooper and thinking, what the hell is this, Dad? And he's like, it's a stormtrooper. And I was like, I know that, but like, what is this? And he's like, it's an action figure. And just falling in love with Star Wars and, segueing into G.I. Joe and all the other, I think Voltron was 3 3/4 inch as well. So it was very much the scale that I grew up loving.
We grew up with He-Man and, watching Star Wars and Ninja Turtles, our story isn't what people think it is, though. It's not, they're not mutated creatures.
Yeah.
I don't want to tell you too much because we want you to read the comic, but it's not what people think it is.
And I only kind of switched over to 6-inch much later, like probably the 2020 era. So yeah, 3 3/4 inch was the scale to go with.
Was it hard to switch your toy line, to come to that realization? Do you see anything better about it, switching it, or?
I still love 3 3/4 inch line, and the last line that of any toy that I really went gaga over was the Halo line that was released whenever they came out with their new game. But I think the 6-inch scale just offers so much more as far as, it's the correct scale for an adult hand. You could put so much more detail as far as paint application goes. You can pack in so much more articulation. I think collectors will remember the Dagobah Luke that had the double jointed elbows so that he could hold Yoda. And while it was done well, it was such a small figure that it just looked awkward. And now the 6-inch scale really lends itself to those double elbows and double knee joints. So I think the advantages far outweigh the cons. The only really con that I can think about for 6-inch scale is the fact that the vehicles have to be scaled up, which of course is going to increase the price point and more importantly, reduce shelving space because all these big retailers, the retailers charge all these companies shelving space. So, they can fit maybe 5 blind boxes where they might be only be able to fit 1 vehicle. That's the only real con that kind of comes to mind when I think about the 6-inch scale.
Just the financial burden of it all. Did you put in any of your own money before the Kickstarter?
So for the first Kickstarter, which I'm referring to the 6-inch scale, I paid for like half of it and I was already friends with Arlen at the time. Arlen did all of wave 1 and 2 in Carter, and I was like, can I pay you like half now and then half when we make goal? And they were like, yeah, sure. And for some reason, I just knew we were going to make goal. I think we made goal on the first week. It was like 5 days in, we made goal, and I was just like, but I did put a little bit in. I put half down on the sculpt, not the tooling.
What was your goal, and what did you hit it?
Our goal for the first Kickstarter was 99,000, and we finished at 360,000 during the Kickstarter. We raised more afterwards as well.
I think that people are just kind of getting tired of dealing with the same toys, you know? I mean, how often do you need to buy a new Batman, you know? Or how many Darth Vaders can you really have?
That's very true. How many Ninja Turtles do you need?
So we don't talk Ninja Turtles because you need all of them unless you only collect Leonardo, and then you only need a couple more, and I think you've got all of them.
I think there's like 5 more.
Yeah, I think I had one of them, but that's a whole nother story.
What do you think is broken with the toy industry right now?
I think that Hasbro has a challenge having so many Disney properties. Disney wants to sell toys to everyone. And right now, it's a complex question because, buyers are going to go to New York and they're going to say, is Darth Vader in that wave? No. Well, I want Darth Vader in that wave. And it's like, we've all got 5 Darth Vaders. So you're stuck with the problem of like buyers insisting on there being a Darth Vader or a Luke Skywalker or a Duke or a Wolverine or a Spider-Man. And you can only buy a character so many times before it stops feeling special, and you max out your supply and demand. So I think it's a little bit of, character fatigue. We're all looking at, 30 to 40-year-old IPs. It's frustrating because it's safe for a movie studio to put out a Batman movie because kids are going to go and watch it. They might be playing on their phone, but they bought a movie ticket, And so they're thinking that that's going to correlate with merchandise.
The figures itself, they have like a mix of vintage and modern.
Yeah.
So how does that
So that's not by sheer coincidence, but maybe to a select degree. So we have what we call like our homage figures. So like for PowerCon, we ended up doing Tanger. Now, if you're not familiar, there's a character in the He-Man world named Beastman, right? So we emulated the same paint schemes. We even gave him his iconic weapon, was a whip, so that we can try and play off of that. Now, that's one that we deliberately paid a tribute to, right?
Yeah.
Now, subconsciously, because my boss and I were both 80s kids, might look a little familiar. Thundercats, maybe? Just maybe. I'm not saying, but just maybe. And then recently we had a fan ask if this happened to be, with the helmet and everything, if it was Optimus Primal.
Oh.
Just because of the blue and the red.
Yeah.
Wasn't our intentions, but I kind of can't unsee it now.
Yeah.
It's a lot of old IPs that studios aren't willing to risk new projects because it's a huge investment. We just recently watched the Transformer 1 movie, which is a legacy IP. And it was a fantastic movie. It looked gorgeous. The story was great, and it tanked. They put all this money into advertising, merchandising, and producing the film, and it didn't do well. So it's kind of a crapshoot. I feel like audiences are starting to get a little bit of nostalgia fatigue, so to speak. And I'm personally hungry for new stuff. It's almost like jumping into a soap opera, like 22 years on, and you're like, I don't know about all of this stuff, and I don't know this backstory. So I think people are hungry for something slightly new, but still feeling familiar.
Do you think that's helping indie toy lines like yourself?
I think it is. I think it's made a little nook for us. And right now we're in the space where we are a complement to the legacy lines. So, you've gotten all your Ninja Turtles and all your Thundercats, and you're still wanting to collect something and kind of get that dopamine hit from buying a new toy, but you've gotten all those characters, and now you're looking for something new, and you'll see something like Animal Wars of the Kingdom, and you'll think, oh, I can kind of fit that gorilla in here somewhere, or this lion warrior would work good with my Thundercats.
This is our main villain, Kali. He's kind of like our Skeletor, Mumra, Shredder. This is his. I say this is his Corvette or his sports model version. So he's kind of decked out and real cool in his fancy armor. But then he's got more of a berserker version, which is on the banner. That's his kind of brutish version. So in the story, he's a clone. He's been cloning himself over and over again to try to kind of purge this illness that he's got. And through that process, they've come up with different kind of variants of him. So I want to do a version that's got like 4 arms and then like a snake, just all kind of crazy versions of that character. So you never really know what the main villain's going to throw at the hero next.
Not necessarily just a toy line. You know, like we're not just Animal Warriors of the Kingdom. We're really wanting to set ourselves out as a brand.
You know, obviously we'd like to get to the point where our IP is known for the story and the characters are actually enjoyed for what they are, not just a secondary or a supplement to those lines.
So you've got Animal Warriors of the Kingdom, but you also want to get other IPs, right?
Right. Yeah.
So what's like, how complicated is that? And then like, are there dream, like, are you like open to anything? You're like, you want to keep something that maybe kind of still not necessarily fits with AWOK, but like is in the same territory?
So kind of feeding back into the ADHD thing, if I'm not interested in it, it's very hard to like really kind of focus on it and be excited about doing something. So any kind of IP or projects that we do, I want to personally be excited about it because I don't want to have to do homework on it and start learning stuff about it. We are working on the Bushido line, which is the feudal Japan versus Oni. And I thought I liked that stuff, but Dan likes it so much more, and he's just a wealth of knowledge. So, you know, someone will ask about like skirting or like the mythology, and I'm just like, Dan, and I'm like, what? Tell me about this, you know? So it really needs to be something that I'm excited about. I don't necessarily have to be, you know, have a dictionary like recall to that information, but I would really like to be interested in it. As far as like leasing or attaining IPs, it's almost a catch-22 right now. We've only got one action figure line out. So I feel like we personally need to have 2 or 3 in-house IPs that we own and that have a little bit of versatility. The AWOK stuff really leans into a cartoonish comic style, while the feudal Japan Bushido is very real to life, you know, especially the humans. I mean, the other stuff is fantasy, but if it was a real thing, we tried to get as close to reality as possible. And, you know, I'm interested in doing stuff with video games, and my little girl really enjoys more like cutesy, fun, silly stuff that I think if we could do that, it would be very popular. She's into stuff like Roblox and Minecraft, which surprisingly is actually like those are like A-tier IPs. And, you know, when you look at it, you kind of giggle and write it off because it's almost 8-bit graphics. But that's what they like, and that's what the kids are collecting. So it's really something that would be huge for us to attain, but just not practical at the moment.
What does success look like to you 5 years from now?
Getting to the point in the AWOK line where we're starting to kind of run out of source material. In other words, like I've created all of the figures in that line that I would like to do. Having several waves of the other toy lines that we want to do under our belt, and getting distribution in comic shops and maybe boutique stores. You know, if we had some sort of syndicated cartoon in 5 years, that would probably kind of check off all of my wants for creative aspirations. But we'll kind of see where we go from here, you know.
How many waves of AWOK are you on now?
So we got our 4th wave in November, and wave 5 and wave 1 of series 2 is in production right now.
Was there like a character you're like, I can't believe this is the one people latched on to?
It's so funny because whenever we did the Kickstarter, it was the first 2 waves of figures for this latest Kickstarter was the brawlers, which are the beefier guys, and then the reptiles. and we did this really cool kind of like Komodo dragon kind of guy, and then a kind of quirky sidekick chameleon guy. And everyone just loved the chameleon. I was like, he looks like Kermit the Frog. Like, I can't get over like people like going gaga over that figure. And we have it on the banner, and they look at it and it's like, tell me about that, and they try to say it. I'm like, the Kermit the Frog character, you know? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, it's a chameleon, you know?
So you had mentioned that the one that you were most surprised about was which one?
It's actually Gresh, who's our chameleon character. He's got moving eyeballs. In the photo, he doesn't have it, but instead of like a traditional organic tongue, he's got a little chain with a spike on it. And if you don't want to display it like that, he's got an additional handle so you can have a little chain whip. And then he's got his 2 katanas. So it's just a fun kind of quirky character that we came up with. He was actually in the original comic that I did back in 2011. He just looked a lot different. This is like the rebooted version of him.
But I had a bunch of toys in my daughter's room, and I remember picking up one of our figures, and I was looking at it, and I was just like, holy crap, we did that. That's crazy. Like, it felt very surreal. And it was maybe like, I want to say it was maybe like 6 months after we had gotten everything and all the customers got the figures. It's like, it was just a quiet moment in the house where I was kind of cleaning up, and I thought, holy shit, we did that. That's crazy, you know?